Hello and welcome back to Inquiry XX121. Per usual, I will be your host, Bryce. And today we're going to discuss the Alien role-playing game by Free League. Now, this is different than the one that came out in the early 90s, if anybody remembers that. This one seems to be a little bit more thought out. It's been out for a few years now, and we're going to review it, talk about its pros and cons, how the gameplay feels, what you'll need to get going, that kind of thing. So let's start off with the setting of the game, which is in the 2180s. Quite frankly, I think this is the perfect setting for this kind of game because it's before the technology in the Alien universe gets a little too advanced for people to be able to take on bigger threats as easily as they do later on. And it's also after the event of Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, The Cold Forge, so on and so forth. So Robert Morse's documentation of what happened on Fury gets out. People start getting rumors of this alien species out there. So there's that like seeds there where you can make that very dramatic and plot, have plot points for it in your campaign if you want. I think that's overall just a fantastic choice to set this game in. There are some modules that take place a little bit earlier. For example, the one that comes with the core rulebook, which I always use as a trainer mission when people are new to the game, because you can get through it in a few hours, even with people that aren't necessarily that familiar with either tabletop gaming or the Alien franchise as a whole. They've seen a couple movies. You can get through that in my experience, about 3 hours. And it's worked very, very well as a trainer module. But that takes place at Hadley's Hope in 2179, so it is a little bit beforehand, but in general, the decade of the 2180s is just a really, really solid setting for this type of game. It's relatively inexpensive to get going. Really, the big purchase you need to make is the core rulebook. This is direct. If you buy direct from Free League, you're going to be set back about $55. But what this gives you is all of the player section, all of the Game Master, or in this case, Game Mother section, as well as a short campaign. I say campaigns. Short scenario, as they're called. It's the equivalent of a one-shot. To run, and that's what I use for my introductory to the Alien RPG. It also includes stat blocks for the aliens and for weapons and things of that nature. So it's essentially your Dungeon Master guide, your player handbook, and your monster manual all in one, if you're more familiar with D&D terms, for example. So really fairly inexpensive for a RPG. I will say, if you're going to do that, I also suggest picking up the starter set. This is about $50. And what this comes with is a set of dice, which I'll talk about in just a second, a very condensed version of the rulebook that is applicable to mostly players, less of the Game Mother section. It comes with a full cinematic scenario, and I'll get to the difference between scenarios and campaigns later. As well as some reference cards that I've used extensively when I run games that have your weapon stats on it, so you don't have to keep looking back. Those are very handy, as well as initiative cards, or the combat order cards that you draw at the beginning of combat to decide who goes in what order. All around a really great deal for that, especially because if you're going to buy a set of the Alien RPG dice, which it comes with, you're going to be set back about $40 anyway. It's about for 10 of the base dice, it's about $20, and for 10 of the stress dice, it is about $20 as well. So for about $10 more than the price of a set of the dice, it's really worth it to get that, plus a ton of other really, really useful things for the game. I recommend sleeving the reference cards, however. The penny sleeves, as some people call them, just trading card sleeves work very, very nicely to keep the edges from getting scuffed and keep them very nice and neat. So since I've talked about the dice, I'll go on to that. To play the game, you need 2 different colored dice. That can be dice you already have. You can have some dice of, say, blue, and some dice that are red, and they represent different things. I would recommend having at least 10 of each. But again, that's up to your guys' discretion. You can use online dice rollers, things like that. So not 100% mandatory to get the dice that they provide, but it does simplify it quite a bit. So how the system works is you have a certain number of dice that you'll roll to do something, and a 6 is a success. To make it harder on you, you could have modifiers that subtract the number of dice you roll, but a 6 is always a success. You also track your stress level, and you'll roll a number of stress dice as well. A 6 on those counts as a success. But rolling a 1 on a stress die can cause you to have a panic attack, can go, and there's a chart of increasingly more severe punishments for being that stressed and failing a stress check. So this is what the dice look like. They're fairly decent quality. I think they could be weighted very slightly better, but overall, not too many complaints about them. I think they're pretty reasonable for dice. So that's what the 6 looks like. Makes it really easy to spot it. The stress dice are this acid yellowy green, primarily yellow. So you can see it also has a success on the 6 side, and on the 1 it has a face hugger, very easy to spot. But again, those aren't mandatory to play. You just need a number of 6-sided dice and some way to distinguish between your regular dice and your stress dice. So that's could be an expensive part of the game if you buy multiple sets of dice, but it doesn't have to be. You could buy generic $6 dice from your local game store, and those would work just as well. I personally sprung for these because huge Alien fan. I wanted the official dice. The face huggers make it easy to spot ones. I really liked that. So continue on with the gameplay. There are 2 ways to play this game that have very different feels. If you are a fan of the feel of, say, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, Cinematic probably isn't for you, because Cinematic is made to feel like you're in an Alien movie or Alien video game, more along the lines of something like Isolation. So there's a lot of death, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of drama. They are challenging. So they are not for people that don't like having to run and hide. They're not for people that typically like to be overpowered in games. That's why I say if you like 5th edition, you might not like this, because this is much more of a challenge, because it's supposed to feel at least somewhat hopeless. I'm a big fan of them. That's what the scenarios are to me, is like really embodies Alien. I like the challenge. I like trying to outsmart not only the aliens in the game, but the person running the game from time to time. If you know the Alien universe through and through, you can think of some relatively clever things that might not have been accounted for. There are currently 3 cinematic scenarios out. Each one is made to do in about 3 sessions. So this is close to what you would expect for something like a one-shot in D&D. This is the equivalent of that. They're in 3 parts, and you get a bonus at the end of each part if you stuck to the personal agenda that you were given. And the starter set comes with one of these 3 modules. I'll do a review over each of those modules in turn later, but it does come with one of them, and it's a pretty good one, I think. I think the second and third one are a little more polished, and therefore are slightly better, but all in all, for something that launched pretty close to the beginning of the inception of this game, I think it's a very solid scenario. Campaign play might be more what you expect out of a tabletop RPG. You're less likely to die. There's less insurmountable feeling situations. This is closer to what you would expect out of something like a typical role-playing game. These are typically a little more laid back, a little more open. I tend to run them on stations, so the players have a little more autonomy on what they want to go and what they want to do in the order they want to do things in. There is 2 published full campaigns that come with expansions as well. So one of these is the Building Better Worlds. This gives you access to more in-depth colony life. This includes new talents, which are the equivalent of like feats, new skills you can get, and it comes with a colony campaign. So full-length campaign here, and there is another one that came out before that, the Colonial Marines Operation Manual. So this is more if you want to focus on a Marine campaign, want to have all the cool weapons, if you want to equip your whole party with smart guns, for example, this is what you want to get, is the Operation Manual. It's just chock full of military equipment. All of them are chock full of lore, which is 100% accurate to canon. I was very impressed with the amount of research they did. And this comes with a very good campaign, actually. The campaign in here, I think, is very well structured and thought out, and it allows your players to go on missions in different orders and start to piece together the entire story. I think this campaign is my favorite of the 2, I would say. I think it's very well structured. I like it a lot. But those do add more to the game, because the base game is set to be more like the first movie, kind of the second movie, where you're set in like a colony that has been fighting something, so it's not exactly in order. Particularly stations, I think, is where it really shines. Stations and ships. There is a section for space combat if you find a way to fit that into your campaign. But if you do campaigns, one thing to note is this game does not lend itself to extended, nearly indefinite campaigns like Pathfinder or D&D or Starfinder, or pick your poison of other tabletop RPGs, where you can just go on for years. You really want to stick between 8 and 12 sessions, maybe 15, depending on how large you want to make the story and how quickly your players progress. But I would not go above that. It really lends itself to these relatively short contained campaigns, which is either a pro or con depending on how you look at it. Because some people like the long drawn out campaigns with the same group of people and the same story. You really get to build your character over the course of years. And this is not that. This is the shorter self-contained, which is good if you have players who can't necessarily make a long-term commitment to a game session over the course of years. So that's a pro or con depending on what you're looking for. I'm fairly neutral about it. It kind of just is what it is with this game, and I think it works well in the setting. So that kind of mitigates the need for something like a level cap, because you don't really level up in this. I think the game very much doesn't want to go past that point, though. Speaking of the XP and level caps and the like, the character sheet is set up fairly simply. I think it's very easy to just pick up and go. You're given a certain amount of points to put in attributes and a certain number of points to put in your skills. Your primary attribute is the one you can put the most into. So, for example, pilots want more agility, and scientists want more wits. And then there are 3 skills associated with each attribute. You put a number of points into those as well. And all that, how to do that is in the player's handbook. Well, the core rules, I should say. And when you make a roll, you roll the sum of the attribute associated with that skill and the skill in dice. So let's say I had 3 in strength and 1 in close combat. I would roll 4 dice, and a single 6 is a success. And remember, you also roll your stress dice on top of that. So making a character is very streamlined, rolling is very streamlined, and you have an experience system which is also very streamlined. It's not up to interpretation, doesn't require a lot of tracking by either the player or the GM, and it's a checklist at the end of the game. It's, did you make money? You get an experience point. Did you stand up to your rival? You get an experience point. So on and so forth. Speaking of the buddy and rivals, there is a system to make the game a little more dramatic, to make players butt heads just a little bit in a fun way. That's the key thing, is they might be your rival, but you're still on a team together. They're not like, you're not trying to kill each other, but it might be that coworker you just don't quite mesh well with all the time. So you can set a buddy and a rival and, butt heads, and I think that's a fun world building aspect to it. That has made some interesting scenarios in the past that I think works very well for building that little bit of tension, as long as you understand that everyone at the table is there to have fun and you're not being intentionally malicious. But that is something that you should be talking to your table with anyway, and should have that healthy balance in any game. Same thing with the cinematic versus campaign scenarios. That's a conversation you need to have with players and the GM before the game is, okay, what are you expecting from this game? Because you could make it a fairly easy, low-stakes campaign where you're a little bit overpowered if you really wanted to manufacture it that way. Or you could make it brutal and nearly impossible if you wanted. This game lends itself to that a lot. So that's a discussion that should be had with the table going into it. Is you should be very upfront about death is part of this game because it's the Alien franchise. You should do your best to make it as dramatic as possible, but in a way that fits the narrative and is very fun for the table. So that's something to keep in mind, is use your death as a story point, maybe inspiration for your team to keep going without you. You made a valiant sacrifice, stuff like that. But that's, again, a discussion to have at the table. Speaking of the customizability of this game, one thing to note is this game is designed to roll as little as possible. Contrast that to something like D&D or Pathfinder, where you're rolling dice a lot, and that's what players like to do. This one is designed for players to interact with the world and only make them roll when it's necessary. So, for example, if they're hacking a terminal, you could just say, oh yeah, you hook it up and it immediately shorts out and the door goes up and everything's fine. But you could also say, okay, you hook it up and it shorts and the door is shut. You need to find a new way in. Stuff like that. It's very customizable. You have a lot of control as the GM, so you need to know your stuff very well. I would know the Alien franchise very well. It's specifically the lore in these books around the time frame. And players will do stuff that's unexpected. They've done stuff that I didn't expect, but I happen to know the answer for because of my knowledge of the Alien universe. So you kind of need to really make sure you know how to do things dramatically appropriate to the game without making them roll. And if you're not sure, you can always just make them roll and see what happens. But that is one thing about this game, is it's very story-focused, very players interacting with the world focused. And I like that better, take some of the random chance out of it. And players feel very rewarded when they make a smart decision that really, really pans out, because it was them that did it, not dumb luck. That's my view on it. Not everybody likes that. Some people like to roll dice a lot and do a bunch of checks, and I am much more on the side of dice are part of the game, but not all of the game, and I like my decisions to matter. If they're good decisions or bad decisions. And I want the repercussions of that to come down to what I did, not what my dice did. So that's my view on that. Not everybody's going to agree with that, and that's totally fine. It's whatever type of game you like to play. This is about getting together with friends and playing a game. That's all I'm going to say about that. There are, as I mentioned, there are 2 expansions. Each one is slightly cheaper than the core rules, so that's something to note. They also have digital access on this. You can get access to them on Roll20 and run the modules from there if that's your thing. And you can get them as PDFs if that's your thing. So there are cheaper options. I'm a sucker for the hardback books sitting on my shelf, so that's just me though. But there are online options by Free League to get access to all of that, and you can actually get both at the same time if you want, both the PDF and the physical copy. I mentioned the other campaigns, other scenarios rather. Both of them are pretty good. I'd say they're pretty well written. They weren't. Some of them weren't the best received by a very small portion of the community because they really wanted a campaign focused on the aliens, the alien species XX121, the xenomorph, what everybody thinks of with the Alien franchise, and they weren't focused on that. They built off of some other really interesting aspects of the Alien universe. I thought that was a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Don't get me wrong, I love me a story about the Xenos and the... Trust me, I'm a big fan. But I really like that the Alien universe has started to take a turn and expand beyond that, and exploring other aspects of this, at this point, vast universe of lore, and really hone in on a few things that aren't necessarily the alien. And some people don't like that. And I get that. I totally get that. They are one of the coolest things in sci-fi. And to have something that doesn't have that, especially if you had some kind of expectation going in that it would, I get how you could be a little burned from that. What I am saying is, if that is you, please give them a chance, because they are very fun. They are very well thought out. And I really like the world building on it. And the good part about this game is, if you don't like it, you can make your own campaign with Xenos. You can make this whatever you want. That's how tabletop games work. If you don't like a published campaign, you don't have to buy it, and you can make your own and have a lot of fun doing it. I love running my own campaigns in this. So, just a little nugget there. There are also a number of very small modules, closer to the trainer module size. We can get through them in maybe a couple hours. In some novels that have been printed recently. Although, admittedly, I haven't quite gotten to those modules yet, so I won't discuss them very much here. But as an added bonus at the end of a handful of novels, I believe, such as Inferno's Fall and Enemy of My Enemy, I believe, both have those modules on the back. So that's a little bonus if you pick up those novels. You also have a little module. Another pro or con, depending on how you look at it, for these published materials is you don't make your own characters. There are preset characters chosen very strategically for the story in the modules, the scenarios. I believe the campaigns you get to make your own, so that is something. But one thing to note is if you go into the pre-built equivalent to one-shots, the scenarios, you're going to be using a prefabbed character. And not everybody likes that either. Some people like more autonomy. And again, you can talk to your GM about that. Maybe they'll let you make a substitution, or maybe just change the name of the character, or like one of the attributes, or something like that. And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask and discuss, and I think yes or no is a reasonable answer for that, and that's something to talk about. But they are prefabbed characters, which makes it very easy to just pick up and go, because you don't have to guess about what kind of characters would fit into this situation. Like, if you're on a space station and all you have is, let's say, a gun, and firing it could explosively decompress where you are in the station, maybe it's not the best character to have made. So it kind of mitigates the guesswork there. And I typically just let my players choose at the beginning of the session who they want to play. And it includes all of your stats. That has a pre-printed character sheet. Includes your personal agenda that you hand out to players with the reference cards, all things like that. Very organized, very easy to just pick up and play with minimal effort on the part of the players. The GM, obviously, you need to know the scenario very well. You need to read through it a couple times. know what's optional and what isn't. So that's something to keep in mind. So going on to my final thoughts about this game, I am a big fan of it. I think it would have been nice if there was some way to do kind of an extended, nearly indefinite campaign, because I have a lot of friends that are interested in that and really building their own characters out. And it's not impossible, but it is challenging with this framework. I love the stress system. I love how easy it is to make a character, how low effort it is. I love how accurate to lore it is and how much information the books come with. I love that the cinematic scenarios feel very tense, very stressful, very much like you're in an alien movie. And I also love that the campaigns can get away with that. I love that there's the two modes of play that have very different feels and slightly different rules for example, in the scenarios, if you stuck to your personal agenda, you get a point that you can cash in to automatically succeed on a roll in the future. That's not in the campaign play. So they have kind of rebalanced it just a touch. I really like that. I really like that there's the two modes to play for the two types of people who either want a very short contained thing or a little bit of a longer thing, which is still, you can be a lengthy campaign, 15 sessions if you're meeting, say, every other week. That's over half a year. So I like that there's that modality to it. I think a few things could be just a touch more polished, but I'm not going to go into super big detail on that because this is mostly matters of personal preference. But the kind of generic, easy to grasp feel that's not as technical as other games, like not I occupy a 5x5 space and nothing can enter or leave or special things happen. There's a number of things that just make it easier on new players in particular, to just pick up the rules and be able to focus more on the game instead of remembering rules. And I really like that. So overall, positive thoughts. As a tabletop RPG, I'd give it a solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10. I think it could be slightly more polished, but overall, I think it's very well done. I think access to some more maps and stuff would be useful, but again, on Roll20, it works just fine. I really like how customizable everything is. There's really extensive abilities to choose from. So yeah, overall, very positive view of this game, and not just because I'm an Alien fan, but also because I'm a fairly avid tabletop gamer. So overall, very positive view of this game as a whole and how accessible it is to pick up and play, and how lore accurate it is. So due to good feel, good access to it, like easy access to play, it being relatively inexpensive, and the pre-written material also being pretty good, I'd say it's solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10. Hopefully you got something out of this. Maybe you were on the fence of whether you wanted to buy it, and this convinced you one way or the other, be that for buying it or finding a different game. But hopefully this helped you out. So once again, I'm your host, Bryce, and I will catch you next time.